Potter murdered my son, and he died April 11th. Today, the justice system murdered him all over again.
Shock, anger, and hurt from the family of a black man shot and killed by a white police officer. Former Officer Kim Potter sentenced to 16 months in prison for killing 20-year-old Dante Wright during a traffic stop, claiming she mistook her gun for her taser. Potter sobbing for forgiveness from the Wright family in the wake of her punishment, the Wright family holding nothing back. A rapidly escalating crisis. President Biden addressing the nation this evening, saying Russia may use false justification to invade Ukraine. Russia accused of staging evacuations, sending phony pretexts to the Russian people with possible plans to invade within days. More trouble for former President Trump. A federal judge is allowing lawsuits trying to hold Trump accountable for the January 6th insurrection to move forward, as the National Archives confirms classified records, including national security information, were taken from the White House to Florida. Escorted out in handcuffs, at least 70 people have been arrested in a crackdown in Canada's capital city after weeks of blocking busy streets. And a growing movement that asks the question, is being served alcohol serving you?
A lot of the times when we think about removing alcohol, we think that life's going to become boring or not be as fun. But framing it as, could my life be better without alcohol, actually kind of opens the door to all sorts of possibilities.
Tonight, we go inside the world of the sober curious, as big names buy in. And millions of puzzle lovers are in a wordle of hurt. As the word game sensation appears to maybe be getting harder, is the level of difficulty rising? And why are we so obsessed? The answers are next. And good evening, everyone. I'm Trevor Alden for Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. I am convinced he has made the decision. Those were the words of President Biden today on the prospects of Russia's Vladimir Putin choosing to invade Ukraine. And tonight, the president said those so-called false flag operations that the U.S. has been warning about for weeks are now underway. All of it as a pretext for Russia launching an invasion in the coming days. Those alleged operations showing images of mass evacuations, including of children appearing to flee from a separatist region in eastern Ukraine bordering Russia. So what does it all mean for Ukraine, and what could happen in the coming days? The region remains on a knife's edge, waiting for what Putin will do. So will he take action? How will the West respond? And is diplomacy still on the table? We begin tonight with ABC News senior foreign correspondent Ian Pannell in Ukraine.
Tonight, the president saying clearly for the first time that Vladimir Putin has decided to invade Ukraine.
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that.
While leaving the door open for a last chance at diplomacy, the president warning he expects an invasion to happen soon.
We have reason to believe the Russian forces are planning to and intend to attack Ukraine in the coming week, in the coming days. We believe that they will target Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, a city of 2.8 million innocent people.
Biden saying the political and economic repercussions for Russia would be severe and that the Western allies stand united. And this is what the White House has been warning for weeks would happen. A massive so-called false flag operation underway in the Russian-controlled East. Fake attacks being staged that could be used by the Kremlin to justify an invasion. Local and Russian state media propaganda now in full swing. Viewers have been shown video of emergency sirens blaring. And images of women, children and the elderly. 700,000 people being told to evacuate to Russia. But there's no credible sign of attacks underway. A massive explosion reported, but an AP reporter on the scene finding just a single destroyed car. Russian separatists accused of staging the incident. No evidence that any of this is true. And today, as expected, President Putin doubling down. Without evidence, claiming the situation in eastern Ukraine is escalating. But even now, saying Russia was still open to further diplomacy if all his security demands were on the table to negotiate. The now very real fear is Putin's forces amassed at the border will invade under the pretext of protecting the Russian-speaking population there. Ukrainian government today categorically denying any intention of launching an offensive. The president urges calm, but people are getting ready. This gun club seeing more than a 500% increase in members in the last 3 weeks.
When you're in there.
Today, even workers from the local water supply station in Lviv taking up arms to protect their city, families and country. Natalia says if something happens, she wants to be ready to defend it.
And there seems to be all the more reason for the people of Ukraine to prepare to defend themselves. Ian Pannell now joins us from Western Ukraine. And Ian, today President Biden repeatedly stressed that this would be a war of choice, that this was Russia and particularly Vladimir Putin's decision. And the president believes that Putin has already decided to invade here, but he also still kept the door to diplomacy open. Is there actually a diplomatic solution in sight here?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that, and that has been the key question, really, as this crisis has evolved and grown and grown. We don't know. I mean, the truth is that the fundamental demands that were issued by the Kremlin right at the start of this crisis were rejected pretty much at the outset by the Biden administration, by NATO, and by the European Union, let alone the Ukrainians, that they would not agree to this concession, that Ukraine would never join NATO and other countries wouldn't, and that NATO would withdraw to these boundaries that were set around 1997. Not formal boundaries, but that it would withdraw from the Baltic states, from other countries that border Russia. That's a non-starter. So, yes, you can continue to have talks, but there doesn't appear to be any common ground. And actually, President Putin, when he was stood alongside the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko today, essentially said that there's only a reason to talk if we're going to talk about that substantive thing. Now, remember, this is the first time that President Biden has actually said he thinks it's definitely going to happen, and it's going to happen in the next few days. Well, Secretary of State Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov are talking about meeting in the middle of next week, Wednesday the 28th, I believe. The location isn't set, but President Biden making clear that if hostilities start, there will be no meeting. He's also saying that he thinks it could happen in the coming days. If that happens, then this may all be academic, and it could already be too late.
And the whole world is now holding its breath. Ian Pannell for us in Ukrainian, thank you. And we also want to bring in our chief global affairs correspondent and this week co-anchor Martha Raddatz, who is also in the region. Martha, I know today you spoke with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Poland there as he was visiting with U.S. and Polish troops. And you asked him whether or not Putin could potentially be bluffing. Let's take a listen there.
This is not a bluff.
I don't believe it's a bluff. I think it's I think he's assembled the right kinds of things that you would need to conduct a successful invasion. So.
He's got things like medical tents and nurses. You would never have seen that if you were going to be withdrawing your troops.
Exactly. If they were redeploying to garrison, we wouldn't be seeing the kinds of things in terms of not only combat power, but also logistical support, medical support, combat aviation that we've seen in the region.
And so, Martha, as the president says, diplomacy is still possible. The defense secretary there saying all signs do look like Russia is preparing to invade.
He sure did say that, but he, too, said he thought diplomacy was still possible. And as you heard President Biden say, of course, up until the point they invade, it is possible. But I don't see how they get anything done at this point with all of those troops poised to go into Ukraine. Trevor?
It certainly has that ominous feeling. Martha Raddatz, thank you so much. And Martha, we'll be able to see much more of your reporting on the ground this Sunday morning in a special edition of This Week from Lviv, Ukraine. Next tonight, the mother of Dante Wright, the black man shot and killed by a Minneapolis police officer, says today her son was murdered all over again by the justice system. Those comments come after the officer who took his life learned how long she'd be spending behind bars. ABC's Stephanie Ramos is in Minneapolis with more.
In a Minneapolis courtroom, Judge Regina Chu carefully addressed the convicted former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter, the family of Dante Wright, and the court on why she was about to break from sentencing guidelines in this emotionally charged case, saying this about the former officer.
The fact she never intended to draw her firearm makes this case less serious than other cases. Second, the scene was chaotic, tense and rapidly evolving. Officer Potter was required to make a split-second judgment. That constitutes a mitigating circumstance. Finally, unlike other manslaughter 1 cases, Officer Potter's actions were not driven by personal animosity toward Dante Wright. Instead, she was acting in the line of duty in effectuating a lawful arrest.
The judge telling the court this was not the George Floyd case.
This case is highly unusual. The other officer cases tried in this court are distinguishable. This is not a cop found guilty of murder for using his knee to pin down a person for 9.5 minutes as he gasped for air. It is the sentence and judgment of this court that you shall be committed to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 24 months.
Tonight, former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter, who says she mistakenly fired her gun instead of her taser at 20-year-old Dante Wright, sentenced to 16 months in prison and 8 months of supervised release, well below the range under Minnesota sentencing guidelines for what Potter could have received. The judge calling it a highly unusual and sad case involving a respected officer.
She never intended to hurt anyone. Her conduct cries out for a sentence significantly below the guidelines.
Jurors during the trial shown graphic body camera footage from when the 20-year-old was pulled over for expired tags and an illegal air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. Police tried to arrest Wright for an outstanding warrant when they say he tried to drive off. Potter pulling her gun instead of her taser, firing a single bullet into his chest. I shot him! Oh my God! The former officer then collapsing to the ground in anguish, and today turning to Wright's family and apologizing.
I am so sorry that I hurt you so badly. My heart is broken and devastated for all of you.
Wright's heartbroken family, including the mother of his toddler son, describing in court their endless pain.
Dante will never get to see his son's first day of preschool, elementary, high school, or college.
And after the sentencing, Wright's mother blasting the judge's decision.
Today, the justice system murdered him all over again. We're very disappointed in the outcome.
A lot of people sharing that same sentiment, and Stephanie Ramos joins us now. Stephanie, I know you covered the trial for us, now the sentencing. I'm curious, what was the scene like out there during today's hearing as opposed to when we saw the trial?
Well, during the trial, we saw much larger groups gathered outside the courthouse. And when that verdict was read back in December, there was a band, there was joy, there were cheers. But today it was very calm, and we saw supporters for both sides, for Dante Wright's family and for Kim Potter as well. And one woman telling us that she is extremely disappointed, saying that it's a very sad day for this city. Trevor.
Stephanie Ramos on the ground for us. Stephanie, thank you. And we do still have some questions about the sentencing here. So joining us now to walk through some of these legal logic of the decision and the sentencing is ABC News contributor and civil rights lawyer with the Cochran firm, Shauna Lloyd. Shauna, thanks so much for being here. So the judge herself admitted that this sentence was a, quote, downward departure here. We heard her giving a little bit of clarity as to how she reached this decision. But can you give us some further sharpening of how she made this decision? And are you surprised at the actual number she ended up at?
You know, Trevor, let's start with the fact that there was a downward departure. These presumptive guidelines are advisory for the court, and the judge does have the ability to make these downward departures when there's a substantial and compelling reason that they can articulate why there should be one. To see a downward departure this significant, I was actually very surprised, but this judge felt that she had enough reasons that she could articulate as to why this downward departure was necessary in this particular case.
And she very clearly wanted to express that quite carefully. You could hear her reading her statement methodically as she was explaining her decision. How rare is it for a judge to be this transparent when it comes to explaining their decision process?
Well, in your atypical case, you know, you don't typically see this level of detail. But with this particular judge, I think she's very well aware that the nation was watching this trial, and there were a lot of eyes and ears on this particular case and looking forward to the sentencing. So under the Minnesota requirements, they do have to be clearly articulated and transparent by the judge in order to make this downward departure. So I think what you saw was her making a record that was very clear and concise as to the reasons that she was going to make this downward departure.
I'm also curious about the fine, Shauna. I mean, how do they arrive at an amount like this, like $1,000 on a conviction, especially when it comes to the loss of a human life?
Absolutely. It seems like an arbitrary and capricious number, but these fines are typically attached to criminal penalties. So first-degree manslaughter in this particular state carries a sentence of not more than 15 years and or fines up to $30,000. Typically, when you have an offense like this where someone is incarcerated, if they don't have a high income, then you'll typically see the fine at a lower statute, lower area. And these particular fines are paid to the state and to the county. They do not go to the victims. They are typically fines that are used to keep the criminal justice system along.
You know, I would love to know what you think, Shauna. So many people for so long in this country have expressed doubt that police officers can be held accountable for their actions or ever be convicted when they take the life of an innocent person, particularly an innocent black person in America. We saw when the conviction was given that it was a celebratory mood that a lot of people thought they could finally exhale. And now some family members feel like that justice has been taken away from them with a shorter sentence. How much does a sentence like this maybe infringe on the progress that those people thought they were getting with the conviction in the first place?
I think typically people think of the criminal justice system as ending with the verdict. But unfortunately, there is a much longer process. There is sentencing, and there is a lot of discretion in the sentencing process. So a lot of times when we have families, such as his family, expressing this outrage about this downward departure, they feel a loss in what they felt was something that should have spoken to the loss of life that they're experiencing. And it makes them feel disenfranchised because they feel as though they got the guilty verdict from the jury. Therefore, there should have been something closer to the presumptive sentencing for this particular crime that should have happened here. And so it can be extremely disenfranchising for the family and in the community at large, and it can cause distrust within the system.
You can hear the very real anguish from Kim Potter, but also the very real open wound with that family. Shauna Lloyd, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Trevor.
Next, the National Archives today confirming some of the Trump White House documents found in boxes at Mar-a-Lago were marked as classified. And the National Archives are also saying that they are on the trail of other White House records that were not preserved. Here's ABC's Chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl.
Today, the National Archives informed Congress that the 15 boxes of presidential records that former President Trump took with him when he left the White House included, quote, items marked as classified national security information. The head of the archives said that when the sensitive material was discovered, he informed the Justice Department. Mishandling classified information is against the law. For years, Trump repeatedly attacked Hillary Clinton for mishandling her official records, specifically her emails while she was Secretary of State.
The thing that you should be apologizing for are the 33,000 emails that you deleted, and then the 2 boxes of emails and other things last week that were taken from an office and are now missing.
He and other Republicans hammered Clinton for using a private email account to conduct official business. But it turns out that was also happening in the Trump White House. In the letter today, the archives said, quote, some White House staff conducted official business using non-official electronic messaging accounts. Those records were not turned over to the archives as required by law, but the archives said they are now in the process of obtaining them. In another setback for Trump today, a judge ruled that lawsuits against him for injuries sustained on January 6th could go forward. In the extraordinary ruling, the judge saying that a plausible case could be made that Trump knowingly provoked those who attacked the Capitol. Trevor?
Jonathan Karl tonight, thank you. Next, the developing situation up in Canada. In the capital city outside Parliament, at least 100 people have been arrested today as police give protesters from the Freedom Convoy a stark warning to get all children out of the protest zone. ABC's Kenneth Moten is in Ottawa for us.
Tonight, after 3 weeks of paralyzing downtown Ottawa, police in riot gear taking on the so-called Freedom Convoy protesters.
Police say they were trying to avoid things like this after days of giving warnings and negotiations with demonstrators, but they say ultimately it was time to take back these streets. Police forced open this RV, arresting the driver. Children among the protesters led out safely by police.
We implore all the parents who have kids in there, get the kids out of there.
Tow truck operators wearing ski masks to protect their identities. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking Canada's Emergencies Act, giving police broad power to make arrests.
When Ottawa police moved in, you were relieved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I even looked at them and said, I'm really glad to see you guys here in significant numbers.
Overnight, police issued warnings and arrested 2 key leaders of the convoy on charges of mischief and police obstruction. A third organizer arrested today.
We will run this operation 24 hours a day until the residents and community have their entire city back.
And when I was up in Ottawa, I heard that from a lot of the residents there that they felt like their city had been taken hostage. Kenneth Moten joins us now. Kenneth, now that this action is being taken, what are police saying about how they're handling this situation? I mean, what are we expecting to see this weekend?
Well, Trevor, as you know from being on the ground here, more than a week ago, Ottawa police say they're trying to de-escalate the situation here, but they tweeted moments ago that protesters have been assaulting officers, trying to get to their weapons here. So we don't know how this night is going to go on as it progresses. We can tell you that at least 100 people were arrested today, actually behind these cop cars here. And on the other side of that bus, we've seen a long line of people in handcuffs being taken into custody to put onto those vans to be taken to nearby facilities. When it comes to this police crackdown, Trevor, we do know that it is expected to continue through the weekend. Trevor.
Those protesters insisted they were peaceful. We'll see now if it ends peacefully. Kenneth Moten, thank you. And when we come back, the burning cargo ship and the very expensive cars now abandoned. The TikTok star speaking out after her alleged stalker was killed by her father. There are warnings about the dangers lurking on social media. But up next, Sober Curious, the growing movement leading many to turn down drinks. Stay with us.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new Hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other program across all of television.
It was a scary time. In the 70s, you had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it, serial killer.
There was a human head in there.
This was premeditated evil.
We have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new videos.
Breaking news overnight.
Your money and concerns about inflation.
The pandemic is not over.
The stories people are talking about.
You don't want to shave your legs? Don't. I was gonna say. And what to expect in the day ahead.
From the top of the world, baby! ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Weekday morning starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
Right now, with so much at stake, Sunday mornings, this is the place. Taking on all the tough questions. Straightforward reporting. No spin, no hype, no bull. Thank you for making ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos the #1 Sunday morning news show versus the competition.
Welcome to This Week.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
Russia and Ukraine on the brink of war. Is a full-scale invasion coming? What does it mean for the U.S.? Sunday, Martha Raddatz is right there on the ground in Ukraine and with a breaking new exclusive with the Secretary of Defense. What will Biden do next? Sunday on ABC's This Week.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run with...
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
The last 2 years have forced many of us to take stock of our drinking habits. And if you're starting to cut back, you might be part of the growing Sober Curious movement. But just what is Sober Curious and how are big names getting involved? Maria Villarreal takes a look at the new drinks, the new spaces, and the mindset of this sweeping trend.
Of all the things Texas can claim, subtlety is not one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I might be able to go to a bar with these on.
Welcome to Austin, home to big football, big boots, and of course, big parties. And on 6th Street, you'd be hard-pressed to find a place that isn't a bar. On Friday night, just a few blocks from downtown, Sands Bar is just as busy 30 minutes after opening. But the cocktails made here have no alcohol.
People will just be bar hopping, and they'll just come through the door. And when they walk in, immediately they know that something's not the same.
Is it that OS moment?
Yeah. It's like they look around, they hear music, they see people are laughing, drinks are being clinked around. Something's different, and it's the energy.
A first of its kind in Texas, the Sands Bar is fueled by a growing movement known as Sober Curious. It means asking yourself if being served alcohol is serving you. The expression coined by author Ruby Warrington in 2016.
When you talk about questioning your drinking, what does that mean?
Perhaps when it came to problem drinking, it wasn't quite as black and white as you're a normal drinker or you're an alcoholic.
Warrington quickly discovered she wasn't alone. Pre-pandemic, she hosted Sober Curious events with hundreds in attendance and wrote 2 best-selling books about giving up booze.
A lot of the times when we think about removing alcohol, we think that life's going to become boring or not be as fun. But framing it as, could my life be better without alcohol, actually kind of opens the door to all sorts of possibilities.
In the early days of the pandemic, we all saw the headlines and the TikToks.
Bored in a house, bored in a house, bored.
Drinking in lockdown. A 2021 study published in JAMA found that the frequency of alcohol consumption increased 14% from the previous year. For women, binge drinking surged 41%.
A lot of people have got to a point where they're actually starting to question their drinking.
Dry January is a popular entry point, including for our own Dr. Jen Ashton.
You're having a dry January.
Once again, TJ and I doing dry January. They function better, they're thinking more clearly, or just, they've done this experiment in self and they've found positive results. That's what life is about.
The growing number of people dipping their toes in the Sober Curious pool is now pushing the beverage industry to make room for newbies. In fact, alcohol-free product sales shot up 33% in 2021, according to Nielsen IQ. Even dedicated shops opening up. Big-name celebrities like Katy Perry, Blake Lively, and Macklemore cashing in by creating their own non-alcoholic drinks. Supermodel Bella Hadid teaming up with Jen Bachelor's company Kin Euphorics as a part of a whole new class of so-called adult functional beverages. This dietary supplement, a concoction of ingredients like caffeine, 5-HTP, and vitamin B6.
Kin. I look to herbs, I look to Ayurvedic medicine and sort of stress management techniques.
She says the success speaks to something greater, a generational trend.
Gen Z is dubbed the sober generation. They just didn't pick up drinking. They don't even have the same qualms that me and my friends do about, okay, wait, when's a good time to stop drinking? How am I gonna do this? And like planning around it. They're just like, it's presupposed that everything they put in their body should be good.
Kin Euphorics, based in Austin, is one of the many options stocked behind Chris's bar, where he shows us his signature non-alcoholic cocktail.
Yeah.
There you go. See, I like it. I love it.
Okay. I can see why people come here. This really does make me feel like I'm drinking an alcoholic drink.
Yeah.
Chris's idea to open this bar was born out of his own struggle with alcohol that started when he was 16.
When did you have your first drink with alcohol?
On a very hot Texas day, I had beer that had been sitting in someone's trunk for 6 hours.
Oh, gosh.
But then I had this amazing feeling, and it was this feeling of connection. I felt like I belonged, like I was one of the boys. And that was when I connected alcohol with connection and belonging and being a part of.
At 23, Chris was in rehab. He gave up alcohol and became an addiction therapist specializing in alcohol.
When I got into rehab, the first thing I heard was someone tell me, you don't ever have to feel lonely again. And so this space that we're sitting in today is a direct result from that very real statement that someone made to me 15 years ago.
While going sober curious can be daunting, telling others represents another hurdle. Once you find that support, taking it a day at a time seems less scary.
So maybe they're asking, why don't you drink? And instead of the typical way that conversation could go, you can answer this evolutionary and this positive question of, yeah, I don't drink because I'm really focused on my writing right now. And then the questions that come after that are much more interesting. Oh, tell me about the book you want to write.
A sentiment shared by John Flores, a regular at the Sands Bar.
You know, you can come here, sit here and just sit at the bar and not talk to anyone all night, or you could meet 2 or 3 new friends tonight.
Liquid courage replaced with clear-headed encouragement.
I survived because of this community. This community lifts this concept up. Sober Curious Life is asking you to start over, build anew, and find new fun and new adventure. Fly into the sky.
Our thanks to Maria. And still ahead tonight, the surprising business at the center of a lawsuit between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. Plus, our conversation with actor Jeffrey Wright. And with inflation so high, how much more does it cost if you're single? We take a look by the numbers. First, our tweet of the day. Major League Baseball's Players Association correcting league officials who say they must postpone the start of spring training. They claim to be committed to staying at the negotiation table with the season at risk. We'll be right back.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive? Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new Hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Russia and Ukraine on the brink of war. Is a full-scale invasion coming? What does it mean for the U.S.? Sunday, Martha Raddatz is right there on the ground in Ukraine, and with a breaking new exclusive with the Secretary of Defense. What will Biden do next? Sunday on ABC's This Week.
National parks are incredibly safe places, but crime will happen.
Hey, my wife had fallen. She's in really critical condition.
At that time, I thought it was just a tragic accident.
There's still a lot of questions we need to ask.
There were small things that didn't totally add up.
This is 2 lives for Harold that have died now. I was shocked. Something's not right.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart that he did this.
It's the time of suspicion. The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
We close out Valentine's Day week with some unfortunate news for single women. Some data shows they're losing out in today's economy. So here's a look by the numbers. Today, we learned the median price for a new home rose to $350,000 in January. That's according to the National Association of Realtors. That is a 15% spike from a year ago and the highest median price on record for the month of January, which is typically a sleepy time for home sales. Of course, if you're single, you are a lot more likely to be shouldering the entire cost yourself. And while collectively American women earn less than men, the median income for single women is even lower, $32,000 a year, while partnered women make a median of $40,000 a year, according to Pew. And then there's inflation, of course. Now that's at a 40-year high. Some experts say it's hitting single people even harder because they're not splitting expenses. Married people might also be getting tax advantages, discounted family rates, things like gym memberships or cell phone plans too. But while single life can have its downsides, more Americans of all ages are choosing to go it alone. A record 35% of U.S. adults between 25 and 50 had never been married as of 2018. In 1970, that share was just 9%, according to the Institute for Family Studies. And we still have a ton to get to here on Prime. The major recall involving baby formula, plus why the avocado shortage could be coming to an end, and is Wordle getting more difficult now that it's owned by the New York Times? Well, that organization says no, but we're going to take a closer look. And first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
More Americans choose ABC News, America's #1 news source. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Take America's #1 news with you anywhere you go, anytime, free. Download the ABC News app now. Breaking news, exclusives, 24/7. There for you with one touch. The ABC News app. Download it now.
It was a scary time in the 70s. You had multiple bodies showing up in Los Angeles.
There were so many murders happening. You had to have a name for it. Serial killer.
There was a human head in there. This was premeditated evil.
You have this clock. This person is going to do this again.
It's me against the killer. Who's going to win?
We'll see who laughs last.
What came next was unlike anything they had ever seen.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
Christopher Steele.
The guy who picked a fight with 2 presidents, and he's lived to tell the tale.
That now infamous dossier.
Supposedly a tape showing prostitutes hired by Donald Trump urinating on a bed, and would be quite a tape if it in fact existed.
I said take out the PP tape.
It quickly became a question of how much of this was accurate.
This is the stuff of movies.
A lot of this is the stuff of movies.
A story of epic proportions.
Phony stuff.
It's a bunch of crap.
It changed history.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other program across all of television.
For the first time ever, go behind the scenes of Disney's Animal Kingdom.
I would like to think she thinks that we're best friends, but she's a giraffe.
Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom, Sunday, February 20th at 10 on Nat Geo Wild.
The deeper you go into black markets, the darker it gets.
Traffic, Wednesdays at 9 on National Geographic.
As of this moment, I'm convinced he's made the decision. We have reason to believe that.
President Biden says he's convinced Russian President Putin has decided to invade Ukraine.
I think he is focused on trying to convince the world that he has the ability to change the dynamics in Europe in a way that he cannot.
A Russian invasion into Ukraine would also impact Europe and the U.S. The U.S. says Russia is behind the recent cyber attacks in Ukraine and could strike U.S. government and private sector sites.
Former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter learning her fate in court Friday in the fatal shooting of Dante Wright.
You shall be committed to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 24 months.
The judge saying prosecutors did not meet the burden of proof for the 7 years of prison time they were asking for.
Today, the justice system murdered him all over again.
I am so sorry that I brought the death of your son.
A teen TikTok star and her parents are speaking out about the fatal shooting of an armed stalker at their Florida home in 2020. An investigation underway.
I had to do what I had to do to protect my family, and I made sure of it.
Ava says what started as a pandemic hobby when she was just 13 years old turned into a lucrative business. Her TikTok account garnering 1.2 million followers.
This is such a dream for multiple kids.
But around 4:30 in the morning on July 10th, Ava's parents say her stalker showed up to their house with a shotgun, blowing open their front door. Rob Majuri says he grabbed his own gun and shot the intruder.
There was no second guessing. There was no time to rethink my actions. I reacted.
Majuri says authorities have told him that he's protected by Florida's Stand Your Ground law, and he's not been charged with any crime.
Brad Pitt suing his ex-wife Angelina Jolie, accusing her of unlawfully selling her share of their multi-million-dollar estate and winery, Chateau Mérival, located in the south of France. In court documents obtained by ABC News, Pitt alleging the Maleficent star consummated the purported sale without Pitt's knowledge, denying Pitt the consent right she owed him and the right of first refusal her business entity owed his. Adding they agreed to never sell respective interests in Mérival without the other's consent.
The FDA telling people not to use certain powder formulas because they can make your baby sick.
We're talking about Similac, Alimentum, or Elecare. If the first 2 digits of the code are 22 through 37, if the code on the container contains K8, SH, or Z2, or if the expiration date is April 2022 or later. Now, the CDC and FDA, they're still investigating, but the FDA says the bacteria that caused some of these infections was found at the Abbott Nutrition Facility in Sturgis, Michigan.
Harsh words are coming today from the president of the International Olympic Committee. Thomas Bach blasted the coaches of Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva for seeming not to offer her support after a poor performance yesterday in Beijing.
Rather than giving her comfort, rather than to try to help her, you could feel this chilling atmosphere. This distance.
Russian officials are striking back, saying the IOC and the media have bullied the 15-year-old since she tested positive for a banned substance.
And we're tracking several headlines around the world at this hour. Take a look at this video from the Portuguese Air Force as they rescue a 22-person crew from a ship near the coast of Azores. And what was aboard this cargo ship? Luxury cars, a total of 4,000 of them. We're talking about Porsches, Audis, Bentleys. It's not clear what caused the fire. And millennials rejoice. Remember earlier this week we told you about the temporary suspension of avocado shipments from Western Mexico. Well, that came after a threat to an inspection worker. Thankfully, now today, the U.S. Embassy in Mexico and the USDA announced its avocado inspection program has restarted, and avocado exports have as well. Now, as we head into President's Day weekend, we are reflecting on the life and legacy of Abraham Lincoln. A new docuseries, Lincoln's Dilemma, premieres tonight on Apple TV. It offers an in-depth look at Lincoln's complex journey to ending slavery and the rarely heard narratives of enslaved people. We know Lincoln was the so-called great emancipator, but there is much more to that history. And acclaimed actor Jeffrey Wright narrates this series. He sat down with our Ariel Reshef.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. What drew you to this project?
I love our history. I love the history of our country. And I love to dig down to discover those parts of our history that are much more nuanced, complicated, and interesting than we are often led to believe. And I think Abraham Lincoln's story is one of those. So this docuseries, 4 parts, tracks his journey from the beginning of his presidency to the end in a way that I think shines light in some corners that may have been previously darkened.
So what lessons can we extrapolate from this documentary, and how is that nuanced perspective helpful to understanding history?
Well, you know, I think we have this understanding of Lincoln that he was the great emancipator, he freed the slaves, and that's why we celebrate him. It's a little simplified. At the beginning of his presidency, he was anti-slavery, but only to an extent. He thought that if slavery preserved in the South would help preserve the Union, then he was all for that compromise. He was a man, and a white man of his times. He was burdened by the race prejudices of the time. But at the end of his presidency, we see him evolve. We see the war effort no longer being solely about unifying the nation, but also about emancipation. We see the ratification of the 13th Amendment. We see black soldiers having participated in the war in massive numbers. Over 200,000 black men participated either as soldiers or sailors. They represented 10% of the Union Army. So it wasn't just Lincoln alone.
Why is that history, that contextualized history, so important to study and bring to audiences nowadays?
Well, if we don't know our history, how can we know who we are today? We think of ourselves as divided, not nearly as divided as it was then. We saw images of the Confederate flag flown over the memorial to Ulysses S. Grant, the general who won the Civil War, paraded through the United States Capitol on January 6th. If you've really read the history, if you've understand the brutality of the institution of slavery, if you listen to Lincoln's words when he says that the Civil War, as brutal as it was equal to the brutality of the institution of slavery.
This documentary sheds new light on history that we all thought we might understand, but it certainly gives us new perspective. What did you learn by filming this?
Wow. You know, I've gained an appreciation for Lincoln, as Douglas describes, as, you know, an imperfect man, a white man, he says, of his times, but someone who ultimately walked the walk. and was as progressive as any president. He ushered in an expansion of rights to all citizens that informs who we are today.
You talked about Frederick Douglass's impact on Lincoln's thinking. What can we learn, and what can Lincoln's story teach us about man's ability to evolve in our thinking and the impact that that can have on generations?
Well, Lincoln was a thoughtful man. It was a thoughtful time. The one thing that I'm most struck about is the profound intelligence of these men and the seriousness of thought, the seriousness with which they write and with which they speak. He was a man who was described as being, clouded in melancholy. And I think that ultimately led to his evolution too, and toward relative to his empathy for the suffering of Black people in this under slavery. He was a man who was searching for the deeper meanings of humanity with himself, and I think he was a deeply patriotic man searching for the profound better angels that exist, as he described them, within our country.
Did his ability to find those better angels give you hope for our future, even in a divisive time?
Well, yes and no. It gives me hope because the history is there for the reading, for the taking in. I hope that our series, is helpful in reminding the audience of our history. But my hope is somewhat diminished because I'm not so sure how enthusiastic we are now about examining where we come from. We won't discover the lessons that Lincoln left us. We won't discover the lessons that Frederick Douglass left us if we don't search for them, if we ignore them.
Jeffrey, hopefully platforms like yours and documentaries like this will encourage the next generation to learn about our history, and we appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Well, I thank you. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure.
Our thanks to Ariel Resha for that conversation. Well, upset, angry, maybe mad with 3 Ds. These are all words that many 5-letter fans of the viral puzzle game Wordle might use to describe themselves lately. As a lot of people are saying, the game seems to be getting more difficult since it was purchased by the New York Times. Our Will Gans has the story.
Can you spell chaos? Wordle's biggest fans are ANGRY with the New York Times. Convinced the words have gotten harder since their version of the game rolled out. The New York Times is going to hell for what they did to Wordle, because how am I supposed to get the word if I don't even know the word exists? The last 3 days' answers were caulk, aroma, and cynic. For comparison, last week's answers included skill, frame, and humor. New York Times Wordle got me screaming and crying. I didn't even know these words existed. And now some users even reporting that they're getting different answers than the rest of their Wordle group chat. The first time that that's ever happened. Hang on. There are 2 different Wordle answers today? A spokesperson for the Times confirming they've updated the list of possible solutions to the daily puzzle, so answers might differ for users on the updated New York Times host page for the game versus players still using the old website. All of this coming amid a Wordle frenzy, fans clamoring over a geography-themed version of the game called Worldle, a Tolkien version of the game called Lordle of the Rings, even a Taylor Swift-themed version called Taylordle. And remember that old Wordle-esque television game show called Lingo?
Pilot, P-I-L-O-T.
That's coming back too. But this iteration will be hosted by RuPaul.
Hello.
The Drag Race host saying H-E-L-L-O and hoping to capitalize on Wordle's popularity. Back in November, the game had 90 daily players, and today, Wordle is thought to have attracted nearly 3 million players across the world.
Our thanks to Will Gans, and for more now on this CRAZE, we want to bring in Abrar Al-Hidi, an entertainment reporter for CNET, who has been, of course, closely following this, although I think millions of people have been, Abrar, because this is such a craze everywhere. Before we get into the questions, I want to establish your credibility, though. How many guesses did it take for you to get the Wordle today?
Okay, so I haven't played today's, but yesterday's was 4. Okay, it's been busy, you know?
I understand. A lot of people in my family are end-of-night Wordle players. I'm an early morning riser myself. How about your first guess? What's your usual word?
Oh, I usually go with, I know adieu is like the big one, or roate, which is a word that I didn't even know was a word before, but that's the one that everyone says is the one to go with.
Yeah, I do raise personally. But I mean, well, let's get to the basic question. Everybody's got their own strategy here. Is that part of why people love this game so much? What is the reason this has hooked everyone?
Yeah, I think what's so addicting about it is that we're all playing this game together. So we all get the same word every day, and people are posting about it on social media. So you're all kind of competing with each other. Like, oh, well, this person got it in 3 tries. I bet I can get it in 2. Or, oh my God, it took you 6 tries. Like, I can beat that. But I think, I think there's a sense of community.
I'm in a family group chat, and I really liked it until today. My grandmother beat me this morning. Settle this for our viewers. Have actually, since the New York Times bought Wordle, have the words gotten harder? What's going on?
It turns out that this is just a coincidence. The New York Times says that it has not changed any of the words to become more difficult. And in fact, when Wordle was first launched in June, each word for every day up until October 2027 was written into a script. So whenever you play Wordle, your browser downloads that script so it can give you the right word for the right day. So this has already been predetermined for the next several years. So the words haven't gotten more difficult, but I know a lot of people have been complaining about that.
People want their built-in excuses. I know I certainly do. I'm curious, though, Abrar, because I've seen so many people talking about this since the New York Times purchased the game, as if R.I.P. Wordle, it's never going to be the same. It's gone corporate. Do you think we're in a second act of Wordle now? Is the phase already moving on? Where do you think it goes from here?
I think there was a sense of novelty when it was just this platform that was created by somebody just for us to all have fun. And now that it is owned by a big corporation, I think a little bit of that magic got a bit lost. But, so far the game has remained the same. It's still free. It's still, supposedly the same level of difficulties.
I'm curious. I mean, we've heard in our Will Gans report, there's all these different offshoots of Wordle now. Some people are just trying to cash in on the craze. Other people have these interesting spins. Where do you see this trend going from here?
It really has exploded. Like, there's so many varieties. There's crosswordle if you enjoy crosswords, and it's kind of like Wordle and crosswords meshed together. I do think we'll be seeing more of these. My personal favorite is Taylordle, which is a Taylor Swift inspired version. So I think as people, figure out what they enjoy, they'll build specific types for different fandoms. I think we'll continue to see variations depending on what people are most interested in.
I mean, it'll be interesting given how much the crossword has permeated culture, if this is maybe a simpler example that everybody can latch on to. Abrar Al-Hidi, we really appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming and talking to us. We send our THANX. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And finally tonight, the image of the day. Researchers are sending this mini greenhouse to the International Space Station to see if they can grow chickpeas in zero gravity. Chickpeas grow pretty quickly. They grow easily. It's why researchers think it might be possible to make more of it in space. If people will accept chocolate hummus in grocery stores, space hummus should be acceptable too. That is our show for this hour. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Trevor Alden for Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and have a great night and a great weekend.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more America